Jiji Murdodan Himijan, Donner Honum Bornagada, Dakar Dargon Santo Shermando. Tumba Tiji Janla Janzormo, Konotoka Ranger Yambunguru, Yondo Kanzoga, Ketsarta, Tony Yamburi Bear Namjur. Longjin Ramjur Zonro Zoran de Masan Game Killer Yala Shara and Gondozon Burmanum Nambrajan, Jaji Jaram Chile Junzap. Jiang Lami Jia Lao Soran de Chen Robertson, Nishangan. Jawar Tiji Shan Lay Alarman, Jimmy Ponzo Lao Soran, Gonja Toban for a Shinji, Gonja Toban for a Shinji, Gonja Toban for a Shinji, Count of Shoters Tongan that's a lumber accounts. Thunder Tumbichi Chermbe, Nyambrando Batam Chandrashas, Aika Northodon Nojenka, Jum Dodam Canon. Dragon Gijanam Jazamba Tamjerkata, Daka Chutanto, Namkatam Yamba Semjan Tamchi, Tondo, Tandilaname Bayan Toberzoba, Sanditi Komurumboche, Tobrasha. T-shirt the Tambichu Kajik Sani, Tonyams of Long Redugo, Yambi Samba Shanjum Shot. Semki Padam Chetir Sansar de la Consambre Chavi Chuna, Dejan Shabir San Abjupi Mumbruba, Topi Dieu. Shansu Sanhua Tamchiti Shopar Gamsur Tumba, Santiti Zikdur, Huarandroa Jisha, Tapachim Do.
Today, we are going to discuss the Shurangama Sutra. We also have quite a few different versions of the Shurangama Sutra in Tibetan. Now, there is even a complete Tibetan edition. But regarding the lineage here, as I have mentioned before, only the 9th and 10th chapters have been passed down. As for the earlier parts, up to now, I have not received an authentic lineage. So I am still searching for it. But whether it actually exists or not is still unclear. The reason is as follows. There may be different translations in Tibetan originally during the early propagation period. According to the renowned Master Bhutan's detailed history of Buddhism, or records in Buddhist history not seen in Chinese texts. But I have not found it in Tibetan either, at least not so far. According to Master Bhutan's view, early propagation, there was a Tibetan version of the Surangama Sutra, but later, when Langdharma suppressed Buddhism, only the 2 middle chapters, the 9th and 10th, remained. There is no... Later, it was said, according to various reports, that Master Bhutan had already made a prediction. Master Bhutan lived around the 1290s AD. He was from that era. He said in 500 years, the sutra be translated from Chinese into Tibetan, and there would be an official Tibetan version of the Surangama Sutra. But this statement was not actually made by Master Bhutan himself. Said Emperor Chanlong. You may have seen it. Emperor Chanlong had a collected edition, and this collected edition included Tibetan, Chinese, Mongolian, and Manchu. All 4 languages were combined together. He wrote Lingyan Sutra. It was a somewhat thicker combined volume. At the beginning of this combined edition, Emperor Qianlong wrote a preface. Preface is in Chinese. In the preface, he explained the reason for this. What I just mentioned earlier was actually not Qianlong. Instead, it was the national preceptor, Master Zhangjia, that I was referring to, national preceptor Zhangjia. He is the 3rd Zhangjia state master, Rolpi Dorje. At that time, he presided over the translation from Chinese into Tibetan. Now, our Tibetan version was translated into Tibetan from the Chinese text. Served chief translator, and also requested that translation be provided in this project. So according to some historical records, it is believed that based on information from various sources, between the 17th and 28th years of Emperor Qianlong's reign, the Shurangama Sutra was translated into 4 languages. Other historical accounts say that from 1772 to 1779, translated by Zhang Jiarolpai Dorje. However, in the back of our Tibetan version, it's actually not very clear at all. The details are somewhat difficult to make out, and the overall clarity is lacking. It's not clear in the Tibetan text who the translator is. It's just that in the current version of the Tripitaka, Tibetan Tripitaka editions, just like the Taisho Tripitaka and the Chanlong Tripitaka, in Tibet, there is also the Litang Tripitaka, the Beijing Tripitaka, as well as the Derj Tripitaka, the Chon Tripitaka, which is a significant Buddhist scripture, and the Hure Tripitaka, another important collection of texts. But where exactly is the Tibetan version included now? Tibetan version in Nathang Tripitaka, Hure Tripitaka, both contain this Tibetan version. So the lineage I have received, reincarnated lamas like Tisha Rinpoche, generally received the Derje edition lineage. So were there any others at that time? Whether there was a Nathang edition or not, I'm not particularly sure. If there is a Nathang edition, I can get it later. But unfortunately, I have not found it yet at this point in time. So for now, our Tibetan lineage, perhaps when we get to the 9th and 10th chapters, I can provide it to everyone. As for the other content, I will cross-reference some of the content with the Tibetan version. But as for the lineage recitation, I won't be able to recite it for everyone at this time. When it comes time to recite the lineage, we can also discuss some text of this sutra. It will probably take a little over an hour. We'll talk a bit about this kind of content. This is just a brief explanation. Here I would like to share some of my personal reflections and insights regarding the Tibetan lineage, offering a few thoughts on its significance and the traditions it represents, maybe with the Lotus and Vimalakirti Sutras in this respect, because those previous sutras have this lineage. So previously, we would always recite sutra to Old Daily and then explain it in Chinese. That was simply the method we used. Regarding the Shurangama Sutra, for me, actually, I really wanted to teach it quite a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago. Many Dharma teachers and some lay practitioners spoke to me requesting they wanted to hear the Shurangama Sutra, but due to various circumstances, I was never able to teach it at all. In 2017, I really wanted to teach it. There were several causes and conditions. After causes and conditions came together in 2017, I even mentioned it 3 or 4 times in my diary. I absolutely must teach the Shurangama Sutra. It was almost like being ill, searching everywhere, seek materials, hear lineage, explore aspects. From 2018 onward, it was basically essentially decided. At first, I was very confident about the Shurangama Sutra, but later I came across some notable scholars from the Republican era, including Ouyang Jingwu, Lu Cheng, and some of their views. Later, there were also different opinions in the Chinese Buddhist community. And after that, I also observed the situation very carefully for a while. But later, about this view, they were all completely based on mere hearsay and simply following what others said. Of course, I thought about this for a while, set aside a special time to explain it clearly to everyone after a while. Because at that time, several of them, including Liang Qichao, were all in various ways influenced by certain notable Japanese scholars. And back then, during that period, there were all kinds of discussions in academic circles. But these discussions are very difficult to stop because many of these arguments, Mr. Nan Huaichin in the Shurangama also gave a brief response. After reading it, I still think his analysis is really very accurate. My own views, and some scholars later analysis, let's wait for a while. And when the time is right, I'll talk to everyone about it again. All of these claims are in reality actually quite unreliable. For those with young wisdom, they might follow what others say. So now I also use the Tibetan version and I cross check it, comparing it. The Tibetan Tripitaka we have now is also relatively reliable. This one has probably been in use for approximately 20 to 30 years. We have a Tibetan Studies Research Center, which was established by Master Thapten Nyima and other individuals. They studied various different ancient versions of the Tripitaka together in great detail for about 20 or maybe 30 years or so. In 2011, they finally compiled this Tripitaka. This Tripitaka includes all the versions of the Tripitaka from Tibet. So this research institute has done an excellent job in their research. Within it, our Shurangama Sutra included 100th volume. There should be a total of 108 volumes in the final Kengyur in total. Out of the 108 volumes in the series, this particular one is the 100th volume overall. If there are in total a grand sum of 108 volumes, later are list sections. This is considered the best kind of reference book, Chinese versions, including the Chanlong Tripitaka, all of them are very necessary and worth consulting. Nowadays, whenever we discuss any sutra or treatise, the great masters of previous generations, especially figures like Emperor Qianlong, all universally recognize the Tripitaka as authoritative and definitive. Explain Tripitaka contents. I think no one will really have any doubts about it. Even if there is, what about this kind? Nowadays, may not have the wisdom or ability to refute them. So I think perhaps when it comes to our Shurangama Sutra, we are using this version to explain it to everyone. Let me just briefly talk a little bit more about this principle at the beginning. This Shurangama Sutra is indeed in the Han Chinese regions, an extremely widely circulated classic in China. Many people truly have great faith in it as well. And whether we look at the history of the great masters or at the history of Buddhism as a whole, in China it has been very widely spread, especially since the Tang dynasty. In every era, numerous eminent monks and great masters who have expounded, promoted, and written commentaries on it. Great masters from various different Buddhist schools have all promoted it. As for other ethnic groups and countries, perhaps the promotion of the Shurangama Sutra, unlike some other sutras. So its dissemination is not extensive. In Korea, maybe from China's influence, then as early as the year 1235 AD, they had already translated it. Now, there are more than 70 different modern and ancient great masters' explanations and commentaries. Moreover, they often emphasize Chan Buddhism, so different schools generally regard it as an especially important Chan Buddhist text to promote. As for other ethnic groups, such as Mongolian and Manchu, there are translations, but promotion is not widespread. Looking at different languages in English, it seems Venerable Master Xuanhua had some of his Western disciples actually translate it. Venerable Master Xuanhua emphasized it. Even now, to this very day, they continue to translate it into English in some Western countries, including various countries at that time as well. Before this, it seems that there were some lay practitioners in Sri Lanka. Xuanhua taught Dharma approximately in the 1970s. And even before that, There were also some lay practitioners from Sri Lanka who also translated it into English and did some promotion as well. This promotion, in reality, it was not particularly widespread or prevalent either in the West. It probably did not have quite as much influence as some other individual sutras or treatises. Actually, some Westerners were also influenced by scholars from the Republican era in China. And there were also different viewpoints this kind of situation existed. As for Japanese, in the earlier days, I mentioned that for Japanese, in the earlier period, there were also some classical texts. And in terms of timing, I mixed up Japanese and Korean. For Japanese, the classical texts are. Now, as for Japanese, many Taisho Tripitaka versions are quite classical, and there are few in modern Japanese. Some exist. They conduct research, and there are some scholars who promote it. Of course, there are also different academic opinions differ, but in our Tibetan area, actually the Shurangama Sutra, unlike other sutras such as the Diamond Sutra and the Bhadrakalpa Sutra or the Golden Light Sutra, it's not like those. So indeed, the Shurangama Sutra is not particularly well known. I want to speak objectively about this. Campus Tibet asked me, heard you talked about a really very good classic, and they want to know exactly which scripture it is. I took the time to explain everything to them patiently and clearly, making sure to use the Tibetan language throughout our conversation so that they could fully understand what I was saying. And they asked whether or not this scripture is included in the Tibetan Buddhist canon. In Tibet, it seems this sutra has only one lineage. Perhaps many great masters have, in fact, never written in Tibetan. I really haven't heard of. In Tibet, the focus is mainly on treatises, and there aren't many teachings on sutras. So there is still, to some extent, a difference compared to the Han Chinese regions. Amitabha Sutra, 100 Karma Sutra, taught by masters. But unlike other sutras, the Shurangama Sutra, it is not very well known in Tibet. So when others ask about it, if I explain it to them, they all say, it's in the Tibetan Buddhist canon. Oh, I've never heard of it. Many people react this way. According to some historical accounts, when Mahayana Buddhism came to Tibet, he brought the Shurangama Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, Chenzen Buddhist texts. He planned to bring Shurangama Sutra to Tibet, but the conditions weren't ripe, so it was not accepted. And up to now, Tibet resembles Western countries. This sutra is not particularly well known. I wanted to share this with everyone, with all of you as well. So how did it actually come to the Chinese region? This story, I think for the most part, at least from my perspective, is well known and quite clear to everyone. Today, I want to express a karmic connection, highlight precious dharma seeking. I want to share with all the early history of how the Shurangama Sutra arrived in China. This history dates back as early as the year 580 CE. At that time, there was a very famous figure in China. As everyone knows, Master Zhize of the Tiantai school, indeed. Master Zhize was respected in China at the time. And what did people call him? They called him Little Shakyamuni or Little Shakyamuni Buddha. Just like in our Tibetan region, Padmasambhava is called the second Buddha. Some say second great Buddha. Perhaps second great is also, maybe we sometimes misspeak, or perhaps we say it a bit off at times. Padmasambhava is called second Buddha because his activities were just like those of the Buddha. In India, for example, figures like Bodhisattva Nagarjuna and Master Vasubandhu, often some wise ones call them second Buddha, Vasubandhu. Second Buddha, Nagarjuna. There is this kind of saying in China. There is also the title, the Little Shakyamuni. At that time, a monk came from India. And after arriving in the eastern lands, this monk discovered that there was a monk and master here. And his attainment was high. At that time, he went to pay his respects. And during his visit, they discussed the meaning of the Dharma. During their exchange, Master Jize, he began his journey by engaging in the dedicated and focused practice of samadhi, which is a deep state of meditative concentration, raised issues. At that moment, the Indian monk said, "These principles are actually found in the Shurangama Sutra." He said, "The realization and attainment you have achieved is very much like what is taught in the Shurangama Sutra." Some content about the Shurangama Samadhi. At that time, Master Jize asked what the Shurangama Sutra was like. At that particular moment, the monk who was present there turned to those around him and began to speak. The Shurangama Sutra in our India is actually, it is also especially treasured. According to history, as it has been told, in the earliest times, it was protected by the fifth heaven devas, generally because it in fact contains the Tathagata's secret, the most truly profound content of empowerment, and includes some esoteric teachings. In this case, the devas were unwilling to spread it in the human world, took to heavenly realms. Later, it was said that Nagarjuna Bodhisattva went to the Dragon Palace. At the Dragon Palace, he thought, this sutra is also in the Dragon Palace. In the Dragon Palace, at that time, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, when he wanted to bring it back, they stopped him, so he memorized the contents of the sutra, brought back to human world. At this time, the gods and humans are all very unhappy, but there was nothing they could do, and in the end, in what is now India, there was the Shurangama Sutra in the human world. When Master Ji heard this at the time, he developed a truly deep faith in this sutra then as they talked. And Master Jize, he had some questions about the source of the merits of the 6 faculties, asked Indian monks, per the Shurangama Sutra, answered his questions, and as they answered each, many of Master Jize's doubts were resolved. Master Jize wanted to obtain this Dharma. Sometimes we might also, when wise people exchange ideas and their wisdom collides, ask, where is this content? I must have it. Could you please get me this book? Can you please send me a copy? Mail it to me? Now it's convenient, a courier can deliver, but in the past it was truly very, very difficult, genuinely challenging. Sometimes when we think about seeking the Dharma, there really is a huge difference. I feel especially moved by this back then after the Indian monk spoke. Master Jize was extremely eager to obtain this Dharma. He then carefully instructed the Indian monk, find way. We in China really, truly, sincerely want to acquire this Dharma. I am also here constantly praying and paying homage to see if it can be brought to our land, perhaps someday soon. The Indian monk might have also promised at that time to try to get it for him, but the Indian monk had already returned home. From that time on, Master Jize, in other words, starting from the year 580 CE, there was a sutra worship platform on Mount Tiantai. On that platform, with deep and unwavering devotion, he gazed toward distant India, constantly and respectfully paying homage and quietly reciting the sacred sutra. He continued to do this for a total of 18 years. All the way until his eventual passing, throughout his remarkable life in the year 597 CE. He kept worshipping this sutra up until that time. However, when he manifested parinirvana, at that time this important sutra still had not yet been brought to China. It was still absent. Perhaps it was due to the power of aspiration of this wise master, the power of his vows, and the causes and conditions he planted. Later, it should have been around the year 705 CE. At that time, which was during the period of reign of Empress Wuzetian in Chinese history in the Tang Dynasty at that time. There was an extraordinary Indian bhikshu, a remarkable Shramana named Bhikshu Banlamiti. Well, actually, when we mention Banlamiti now these days, it refers to our paramita, which in essence means wisdom. It's different translations of the name. So this is the paramita monk, a figure who plays a significant role in, perhaps it was from his past life's causes, or maybe he was a manifestation of a bodhisattva. I'm not entirely sure, if I'm being completely honest. But this person was remarkable. Today, for all of us, the primary source for reading this book, which is recommended for readers, comes from the aspiration and vows of this great bodhisattva. At that time, as the story goes, he heard that in the past, the little Shakyamuni of China, Master Zhize, had already spent 18 years prostrating to obtain this scripture. When he heard this touching story, he felt that the Buddhists in Middle-earth and all the innumerable sentient beings within the vast realms of Middle-earth had an exceptionally special karmic connection with this scripture. So he made a vow to himself, determined to do whatever it took to bring this sutra to China. The first time he managed to obtain the scripture completely intact, and after obtaining it, he then set out with the scripture, but at the border, specifically at that time, during that particular period in India. Looking back at history then, it seems that India was made up of many different countries. According to Master Yuan Yang, when we carefully read through their insightful commentaries, India back then was not like it is today. It was made up of a particularly large number of countries. When he was carefully and cautiously crossing the border with the ancient and sacred scripture in his possession, what was the overall situation or the general circumstances in India at that time? It is strictly forbidden to take it outside under any circumstances. They regarded them, without exaggeration, as national treasures, as first-class cultural relics. They were not supposed to be spread abroad. And because of this reason, back then, whether it was a Xuanzang or Faxian, many great masters were unable to obtain this scripture. At that particular time, when we were standing at the Indian border, the situation there was as it was back. There were probably, or most likely, special rules and regulations regarding this. When they reached the border, not only did the authorities refuse to let them pass, they even made him return it, and he was subjected to certain punishments. There was nothing he could do. So when we see that he still brought the book with him, even after everything that had happened, what exactly perhaps then transportation was not so developed. These kinds of scriptures were not allowed to leave the country. At that time, he was unsuccessful, and after returning, Banamiti still hadn't given up. He kept on thinking deeply and thoughtfully, pausing for a moment. Actually, a wise person, when faced with an obstacle, won't give in. He will keep trying. So what method did he think of the second time? He thought about taking this scripture, memorize the entire Shurangama Sutra. He thought, if I memorize it, if you go to Middle-earth, there's really no way to actually know what's in my stomach. No one would be able to discover it either. Nowadays, some people try to sneak out of the country, will come up with all sorts of methods. So at that very time, he thought, I must without any doubt memorize it. Then he spent a certain amount of time and memorized the entire scripture in its entirety. After memorizing it, he set out again. But at that time, transportation was still inconvenient. He traveled over mountains and rivers, enduring. Finally, when he reached the border, as he was slowly getting close, he recited it quietly to himself again. See how I memorize it? Step by step. If he couldn't recite it successfully, it wouldn't work once he got there. So as he was reciting it, as the journey was very hard, and on top of that, his physical strength had declined. In the end, he forgot many words. Even though he had arrived, maybe he became afraid. Because everyone is very nervous when crossing the border. When it was almost time to cross the border, he checked himself repeatedly, and in the end, he really couldn't do it. So after he came out, it still didn't work. Then after a moment, he went back again. Third time, he looked for another way. What was his third method? At that time, there were many arts in India, and these were really very well developed. Ancient India had all kinds of different things. For example, specifically some techniques, for instance, even now, many Western invite some people, perhaps colleagues or friends from India. India has scientists, which we might also know about. Now, what the West likes the most, including now currently in the most advanced circles of the West, in the top levels of the scientific community, the people they invite, one group is scientists from India and another is from Israel. So in their ancient cultures, they were still extremely wise. He thought of some methods. He wrote out the entire Shurangama Sutra in extremely fine script, and per historical accounts, it was written on sheepskin. Sheepskin split open. There was a very thin layer inside, and on that layer, some say it was written on a special kind of white cloth, a fine white cloth. But no matter what, he wrote the entire Shurangama Sutra on this especially fine white cloth. Then he carefully rolled it up and thought about hiding it inside his body. At first, he considered the buttocks or thigh, since there is more muscle and connective tissue present there, and it could potentially be hidden. But then I thought it was a bit disrespectful, that hiding Buddhist scriptures in the lower body would be disrespectful. In 1990, didn't we go to India? Back from India, at that time, His Holiness gave numerous teachings there, including commentaries on the seven-line prayer, the practice of the three roots, the lamp of certainty and the Lama's heart essences, as well as teachings. And in India, at the Namdolin monastery, elsewhere, His Holiness gave good teachings. We felt that even in Tibet, such depth had never been reached. We actually made audio recordings back then, you know. There were also some teachings from other great masters and eminent monks. We brought them back, but bringing them back was still somewhat difficult. Nothing like what is now commonly referred to as the device known as the CD iPad today. None of these existed, let alone mobile phones. Back then, everything was, youth don't know what an audio cassette actually is. Audio cassettes have been obsolete for many years now. So we took these audio cassettes. For some recordings of His Holiness's teachings, we had to take them apart. After taking them apart, the thing inside, what do you call that strip? The strip in the cassette, what's it called? Huh? The magnetic tape, the tape reel, you know, right after taking it apart, if you look inside, you'll see that it isn't just a single strip. Instead, so we took that out again, just like before. After removing it, we rolled it up. After rolling it up, we put it inside clothes, right in the very middle of the skirt itself. Then we carefully took it apart, and then we put it right here, just as planned. But putting it on the lower body was a bit disrespectful and not quite right. Finally, our monastic robes, right around the waist area, we placed it there, making it into strips. Because inside the cassette. After rolling it up, we put a piece here. Then we very carefully stitched it back up, making absolutely sure everything was secure and in place. And after that, we crossed the border just like that, without any issues. Crossing the border into Nepal at that time. We were coming from the Hong Kong side, but we were still quite worried, honestly. We were still quite worried about. They slowly started to carefully check some of our personal things and belongings. But the inspection equipment in Nepal was really poor. So when they searched, they just patted around here and there. When they were patting us down, we were honestly a bit nervous, just a little bit on edge, to be honest. But later, when we actually crossed the border, one thing was the cassette tapes. And at that time, we had someone called Dr. Reba with us. He bought a lot of cloth because there was simply no Indian fabric available at that particular time. We monastics now, Indian or Nepali fabric, easy to get. You couldn't get it. He thought it was especially good. Things like various shawls and skirts. He couldn't help the overweight luggage. So he wore several different layers of skirts, one on top of another for extra warmth, and several layers of shawls, each one carefully arranged to provide warmth and comfort. The shawls in different, when we were crossing the border, His Holiness the Dharma King said, "Has anyone else noticed that Dr. Reba looks a lot heavier than she usually does today? I wonder what could have caused such a sudden change." It was mainly because at that time, Indian cloth was for monastics. Back then, for us, it was really almost impossible to get it here, as you can probably imagine. When we saw it, soft and comfy, but we didn't have any. Lama Soton and I were even more focused on this. Some of the Dharma King's tapes and such, Dr. Reba brought a lot of them. In the end, we passed through customs very smoothly and without any issues. Arrived in Hong Kong. Once we finally made it to Hong Kong, things definitely became much easier. Lost track of where I was in the store. Bandramiti took that, he really did take it, honestly, he did seriously. At that time, it was incredibly moving for everyone involved. In the end, he felt the flesh from his lower body. If he hit it, that disrespects Buddhist scriptures. So later, he chose to cut open the flesh on his left arm, cutting open flesh. All the scriptures that have been referenced just now, as we have just discussed, after he cut open the flesh of his arm, he put it carefully inside, making sure it was secure, and then stitched it up. Once the wound had basically healed, he went to customs. On his third attempt, he made it through. Successfully passed through customs. At that time, he might have entered by sea. And the place where he landed was said to be Guangzhou. When he finally arrived in the city of Guangzhou at last, perhaps some people already knew about it at the time, he might have also understood some Chinese. It is said that this Paramartha, he was proficient in the languages of 4 countries. After arriving in Guangzhou, during the reign of Empress Wu Zetian, there was a prime minister named Fang Rong, who happened to be the layman responsible for the final editing and writing. He was a very devout Buddhist in his daily life. However, during his time in office, chose wrong side. Later, after some time, he was formally demoted and then sent to the city of Guangzhou. There, he was considered the highest ranking official in the area. He received his Dharma master. He very respectfully invited him to what seems to be a temple in Guangzhou called Jiji Temple. It was during this period that he started to offer hospitality and provide shelter to him, welcoming him into his home and taking care of his needs. This significant event took place starting from May. They began the translation work. As for the translation, we might discuss it in the next day or two about the different chief translators and some assistant translators. There was a master named Huai Di who was Han Chinese, and they were Indian monks. By working together and combining their individual strengths, they successfully formed a translation team, uniting their efforts to achieve a common goal, and then began translating. Of course, when he brought it out, at that time, it was said in history, when he arrived in Guangzhou, and carefully took it out from the temple, making sure not to damage anything in the process. At first, after it was taken out, because perhaps unlike us now, he traveled by water. You see, even in the case of Faxian back then, it took 70 or even 90 days, such a long time, so it might have caused a significant delay. Additionally, there probably weren't any other modern technologies like we have now in our daily lives. Perhaps at that time, within the flesh and blood, when it was first taken out, it was blurry. It was hard to distinguish and hard to make out the characters. Later, some say it was Fang Rong's wife, others say another. But regardless, there was a mute woman, a mute person who cannot speak. When she saw this situation, she suddenly spoke. What did she say? She advised using human breast milk. Perhaps it become clearer. Thus, they used human breast milk. And then every single character gradually became extremely remarkably clear and distinct. Perhaps what I said was a bit off topic, but after they finally and carefully managed to successfully reveal the hidden text with great care, they established a translation team to work on the translation. In fact, this process was extremely difficult. Sometimes I think, like this Paramita, to have such compassion for a country he had never even met. People's words are always so deeply compassionate and caring to him. At that time, during those days, there were no anesthetics available either, for that matter. He cut flesh from his own body like that. He took flesh from himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do it. After removing flesh in this way, sometimes the spirit of these bodhisattvas is truly unimaginable and incredible. When we ourselves take a few Dharma texts to another country or endure a bit of hardship or cold and heat, even then we find it unbearable. When we look at our attitude toward the Dharma, our motivation to spread the Dharma, these great masters are dedicated to promoting Buddhism. There really is, without any doubt whatsoever, a truly huge and significant difference. Was it last year? I saw a Shurangama Sutra version. Now make it into a movie. There is a segment prepared for everyone in it. Just now, Paramartha, showing the process of how the Shurangama Sutra was hidden. Please take a look at it when you have time after we continue our discussion.
Namo Sarvabhuta Bodhisattvebhya Namo Saptanam Samyak Sambuddha Kotinam Sasyarvaka Sangamnam Namo Loke Arahantanam Namo Sartapandanam Namo Sakrita Kaminam Namo Annakaminam Namo Loke Samyakatanam Samyak Pratipananam Namo Devarashinam Namo Sita Vidyadhara Rashinam Sapanugraha Samartanam Namo Brahmane Namo Indraya Namo Bhagavade Rudraya Umapati Sahiyaya Namo Bhagavade Narayanaya Lakshmi Panjamahamudra Namaskritaya Namo Bhagavade Mahakalaya Tripura Tradashura Sena Praharana Rajaya Tathakataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Namo Bhagavade
这经卷一去处，正逢河上口，请随我来。南无佛，忍辱果然能容是血字啊！弟子听闻，前朝智已大师为求此经，曾筑高台，向天竺国方向虔诚叩拜了整整18载，仍未有因缘见其真容。而今我们竟亲眼见证了这原文范本的楞严真經。
若無巴拉密啲法師拋臂藏經，捨身東道，靈驗聖教不知何年何月，方能與我東土眾生結緣。感恩十方如來，調御隨蓮。
In fact, the great masters of previous generations, whether in seeking the Dharma or attaining it, have left us these profoundly deep and meaningful scriptures which continue to inspire and which are truly invaluable. When I was preparing for this talk, I actually felt quite sad and cried several times. Well, right now, I think I can, at least for the moment, hold it together. However, we, the later generations, as descendants, should also have a heart of devotion and a sense of how rare this is. We must remember these great masters of the past who used their very lives and blood to obtain these precious scriptures and treatises. Now we have these resources readily available, whether in book form or ebooks, and many of them are very convenient to access. Perhaps those who do not understand the teachings of the Buddhist scriptures might think this is just an ordinary book. But for those who understand the truly profound and deeply significant meaning within them, the essence, everyone should have a truly sincere and deeply grateful heart, including just now Pramiti. After he left behind this Dharma text, he felt truly and completely at ease. He then returned to his own country to endure great hardship. He never stayed here again, he just went back. The so-called Sanskrit text at that time, apart from that, did not exist. Now, it is said that in some temple in Henan province, around the year 2001, an incomplete Sanskrit version of Shurangama Sutra was found. Later, well, around 2017, it was placed in a special memorial hall. Some Westerners, including those from English-speaking backgrounds, often have also made some comments. They say that this may not necessarily be truly reliable and that it might require further verification. There are such opinions. But regardless, the original ancient Sanskrit text, as you might imagine, coming to Middle Earth is not exactly easy. After they finished translating it at that time, it is often said and widely believed that the highly respected Prime Minister Fang Rong brought it into the imperial court and palace. However, at first, it did not receive much attention. Later, Master Sheng Shu, a Northern School of Chan Buddhism leader, seems to have been very fond of this sutra. He began to promote it in the imperial court at first, and later it started to flourish throughout the country. Even up to today, it continues to receive special and focused attention in a wide variety of different places and regions, especially for many people in the Han Chinese regions. The causes and conditions related to this scripture are even more incredible. Han people, actually, to be honest, it's really the same everywhere if you think about it. We sentient beings are just like, such as a medicine. If this particular medication could only be used, for example, for people in a specific place, people elsewhere are untreatable. There is no such idea. Using Western medicine can be used anywhere. Traditional Chinese medicine, all. So I think for those other places where the teachings were not spread in the past, from now on it should also be possible to spread it everywhere, like beautiful flowers blooming all over the land. Like the Han masters, for example, Master Yin Guang, he included it in the 5 Sutras of the Pure Land. Master Maprapta, Mindfulness of the Buddha chapter. We have talked about this before. Chan Master Baizang, the Shurangama mantra from this scripture, he put it in the morning and evening classes, in the daily morning and evening practices of Chinese Buddhism. That's why later great masters placed special importance on it. For example, during the Qing dynasty, there was someone, not sure who wrote it, I read it, but I couldn't find out who the author was. After reading the Shurangama Sutra, I stopped reading inferior books. After he read the Shurangama Sutra, he stopped reading books that were just worldly rubbish. He felt that everything else was meaningless, all just dregs. His words became quite well known. In fact, within Chinese Buddhism, including Master Yuan Ying from the Republican era, Master Yuan Ying should be considered a modern figure At that time, he was the first president of the Buddhist Association of China. But his spirit of scholarly research and inquiry, I think, was truly remarkable. It was actually when he was 24 years old, the first time he encountered this scripture, that he developed tremendous faith in it. He said, from now on, I must study this text, or I must become enlightened through the Shurangama Sutra. He may have relied on some teachers, but as for Master Yuan Ying, he said that in his own room, there are many, many different questions about the Shurangama Sutra. Every time a question arose, he would put it up on the wall. After posting it, he would pray and meditate, seeking to resolve the question through his spiritual responses, all the way until he was 68 years old. From age 24 to 68, he was always contemplating, studying, and reflecting, always analyzing, praying, meditating, and so on, using different methods. By the time he was 68, his room was filled with questions about the Shurangama Sutra, with notes posted everywhere, all over the place. Some Western students facing a question like to post notes by their bedside, and some international students, or those who love to study, post up every question they had. But as for those people who really don't like to study at all, next to his small, old, narrow wooden bed, worn with age, they would put up photos of their favorite celebrities. Teachers noticed this. Some Western teachers told me when they checked the students' dorm rooms, you can basically tell what kind of mindset or attitude the student had. If the student had a lot of books and posted up a lot of questions, in the West, it seems many like to use all kinds of colored pens and colorful sticky notes and stick them everywhere inside. Some schools even specifically provided these supplies. Yuanying was like this once. Today, I don't really feel like giving a lecture. It feels more like just chatting, but that's fine too. This way, you all actually won't feel tired either. At that time, Master Yuanying, his room was filled with questions about the Shurangama Sutra. When he reached 68 years old, he began, all these questions were gone, not a single question remained. Then at that time, he began to wrote his commentary on the Shurangama Sutra, 2 thick volumes. I have read them before. This time I don't have time, but I remember that at the beginning of his book, he focused on discussing the title of the Shurangama Sutra. If we were to cover it, it would take us several classes. He must have analyzed it in great detail. If we use his book as a reference, it's very comprehensive. But now, due to time constraints, we won't be able to cover all in detail. Maybe we would still talk a bit more thinking, analyzing, and researching. Maybe we discuss those too. But things aren't like they were in ancient times. In the past, if someone gave a lecture, many people had more time and enjoyed attending. When someone gives a lecture, many people dislike it because they have to turn off their phones and it interrupts a lot of other things they need to do. Doing well, since many people are still willing to set aside other things to attend the lecture. That in itself is quite remarkable. So if we go too broad, it's just not possible. But we still need to talk about it. The Shurangama Sutra is indeed vital. Because of this, in the past, Han Shan also said, if you don't read the Lotus Sutra, you won't understand the Buddha's painstaking efforts to save the world. If you don't read the Shurangama Sutra, you won't grasp the key to enlightenment. The Lotus Sutra is for becoming a Buddha. The Shurangama Sutra is for awakening. Perhaps this saying comes from here. Because we haven't read the Lotus Sutra, we don't know what Buddha is. How is his painstaking care for all living beings? If we haven't read the Shurangama Sutra, we won't understand the achievements possible in spiritual practice. Many great masters have said, when it comes to the Shurangama Sutra, this provides all the essential instructions and practical guidance needed for anyone who wishes to follow the path of spiritual practice, starting as an ordinary person and gradually, everything's already there, right in front of you. It's like we say about the preliminary practices. In reality, from being an ordinary person all the way to complete realization, key instra, are already perfectly included within this indeed. Especially with our Shurangama Sutra, if it were to completely vanish and cease to exist from our world, especially in our everyday lives, if the Shurangama Sutra were to vanish from the world, then the Buddha Dharma would begin to fade away. Because within it there are truly many significant, important, and valuable teachings about the states of demons. If we are able to widely propagate the Shurangama Sutra, it's very likely that the demonic beings will be displeased, or it may even have a certain, perhaps noticeable impact on them. So generally speaking, this is the most crucial point. Therefore, many great masters often say, once the Shurangama Sutra is lost, then the Buddha's teaching will disappear. If the Shurangama Sutra is widely propagated in the world, is propagated well, then the teachings and realization of will also be well propagated. But this statement is not without basis. I saw in the Qianlong Tripitaka, there is a specific Buddhist scripture called the Sutra on the extinction of the Dharma. This says, the Shurangama Sutra and the Pratyutpana Samadhi Sutra, these two will be the first to disappear when the Dharma is extinguished. Then the 12 divisions of the scriptures will, over time, gradually and completely disappear and never reappear ever again. Not written words are seen. About our shamana's robes, when the time comes, when the true Dharma is extinguished, they will naturally turn white. It will become very difficult to dye them red or yellow. During the Dharma image age, such phenomena will occur at that time. Therefore, for those of us who sincerely wish to faithfully uphold the Tathagata's teachings in our daily lives, we must always remember to promote the Shurangama Sutra. We have a special initiative blossoming. I think this is an auspicious start. I hope that in the future, the spirit of blossoming everywhere, whether the Shurangama Sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, or other scriptures, throughout the world, in every region, everyone should make a vow to let flowers bloom everywhere. In this way, there is hope for the Dharma and the Buddha's teachings can remain in the world for a long time. Therefore, I also hope that all the different languages in the world and scripts can spread the teachings, because every place has its own distinctive and special culture, unique in its own way. And for these cultures, using their own language, their own dialects is extremely important. If we only use Chinese, only use Tibetan, or only use English, that would still be insufficient. If every region spreads the teachings in this way, then the blessing power of Shurangama Samadhi will absolutely not be destroyed or eradicated at all by any external demons, nor by any heretical paths. This is a so-called great wisdom theory, Great Wisdom by Nagarjuna. Within it, there are some important concepts about the Shurangama Samadhi. The Shurangama Samadhi means the distinction between the three aspects of the mind. The Qing language refers to the language of the Qing state at that time. That is to say, Chinese. In Indian language, it is called the term Shurangama Samadhi. In Chinese, it's called Jiangxiang. According to our Tibetan language, Shurangama means Buddha's crown, the very top of the Buddha's head. Yan is a word in Chinese that signifies being strong or courageous, brave, courageous. That's the meaning. So the meaning is that, in essence, if one genuinely does possess Shurangama, Shurang, one word. Some of the translations in the text as presented here are in particular very in Tibetan or other versions, it's called Buddha's crown. Why is it called Buddha's crown? Because among all attainments, it is the highest state of the Buddha. This is a type of samadhi. What kind of samadhi? It is courage, this kind of courage. Once we finally possess it, what exactly is it truly like? It means one can clearly discern all the various aspects of samadhi in every detail, knowing everything, whether deep or shallow. For example, this general of ours, he knows the various abilities of the soldiers under his command. By the same principle, if a bodhisattva attains this Shurangama Samadhi, then no afflictive demons or demonic beings whatsoever can ever destroy him. If they try to harm us, it simply won't work. Therefore, for us, actually, we should truly attain this Shurangama Samadhi in our practice, because as we practice or in the process of spreading the Dharma, many things we cannot discern. If we cannot discern them, it's really very easy to end up without realizing it, practicing incorrectly or even going astray. Repair process failed, attempt unsuccessful, etc. But if we have this excellent method of practice, then we won't be controlled by demons, Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra. There is another analogy, for example, under a wheel-turning king, there is a special treasure called the general jewel of the 7 treasures. The general jewel can destroy all enemies. With Shurangama Samadhi mantra, it can actually completely destroy everything. So generally speaking, whether we are in the process of studying or in the process of teaching, there may be some adverse conditions. I'm talking about this today. But there won't be any major obstacles, rest assured, at this stage. For Shom Buddhists, sometimes, in terms of their own mindset, Mara, the evil king, often targets those who seem easier to bully at first glance, just like those wild wolves in Africa. When they see a herd of cattle, they will target the weak ones there. Those are the ones they will catch, for example. Other than that, they won't go after the bigger ones. So generally speaking, in our practice, those prone to wrong views or negative thoughts, those not diligent practice, these people, possibly a very small number of people, may personally encounter some adverse conditions. So we ourselves should pray more to Guru Rinpoche with deep devotion and sincerity, and engage in other practices, including cultivating bodhicitta. So generally speaking, there's really nothing for us to worry about in Vajrayana, in the treasury of the Dharmadhatu. If these profound teachings are widely spread, then the demonic forces will be even more upset. But we rely on lineage master's blessings, and the wonderful blessings, the blessings of Guru Rinpoche. We also possess compassion and bodhicitta. Whether towards celestial or demonic forces, some of them create all kinds of obstacles for us at every turn. But for those whose mind streams can be transformed, we use compassion and bodhicitta. Let them generate genuine altruistic mind. If there are some others, then we can only rely on the powerful practices of Guru Rinpoche to subdue them. There's no other way. We ordinary people, if we cooperate or communicate, we use, if that's really not possible, then we have to use another method. This is just how things are done in the world. So in the process of spiritual practice, I'm the same way. Whether teaching Tantric Dharma or teaching the Shurangama Sutra. The Shurangama Sutra is a profound teaching in Chinese Buddhism. I think many great masters have also propagated it very well. I'm not a master, but I think based on other information or factors, the transmission of some teachings from the Sutrayana and Vajrayana, some ordinary minor obstacles, I will never give in to them. As long as I am alive in this world, if only 5 or 10 people remain, I will still finish teaching this throughout my lifetime. If something happens during my life, then there's nothing anyone can do about it. No matter which sutra I am teaching, it's the same. So if nothing happens, I will not stop halfway, because for me personally, I feel this is also the first time studying this. It is also very rare and precious if relying on my own ability to study it. Even after reading it several times, still wouldn't manage it. So studying together with everyone is a very good opportunity. I hope that all of us here, of course, some people just come to simply have a look and listen, whether you call it being a bystander or whatever else, just to check if today's Shurangama is good. See if anything's interesting, then watch. I don't have any expectations for people like this, because you, no matter what I say, you'll end up leaving anyway. So in the end, I just honestly, with a heavy heart, say my final goodbye to them. Because our Vimalakirti Sutra, and when we taught the Lotus Sutra, many people came on the first day. On the second day, there were just a little bit fewer. Later on, there's a group of people who were attentive and dedicated. They attended every single session, never missing one. Some people, though things came up, still tried their best to catch up, making up the session the next day. Everyone who is serious about this Dharma. So I think that all of us together, maybe we'll finish teaching this Dharma next year, or maybe, depending on various conditions, it might be extended a bit longer. Many of us now, whether it can be so very convenient, such excellent circumstances and conditions, if we can keep listening, I'm unsure, because there are many complicated causes and conditions. Generally, when anyone transmits the Dharma, it's not as simple as one might imagine. As for me personally, previously relying on the blessings of the Guru Rinpoche, there might be some auspicious conditions. Previously, always through the blessings of the Dharma protectors, and many teachings are already complete perfectly. I have always been especially content with that. I believe nothing will happen, but if something does, even if we don't have video, no audio, in the future, regardless of the situation at hand, we can use other means, including all kinds of things nowadays, like CDs or internet, other ways. But generally speaking, we should all really make efforts in every aspect, and everyone who intends should work hard together. For all of us to come together like this, to study these teachings that the great masters obtained with their own blood, if we now just listen to one class and don't finish, then are we really Buddhists or not? Maybe that's something we each have to ask ourselves, isn't it? So I hope that everyone should still approach this with a very sincere, truly genuine and earnest heart, with all your heart and intention. I think that's basically it, to be honest, at this point in time. May all of our practice with dedication and sincerity be truly, completely, and perfectly accomplished in every way possible. We just saw it earlier today, just recently. We recited prayers together to the Dharma protectors today, whether it's the Shurangama Sutra or the Ratnagatra Vibhaga or some other related teachings. I hope that since these teachings are quite profound, if you feel that you have heavy karmic obstacles, recite Vajrasattva mantra and the mantra of Guru Padmasambhava. Now here together, let's recite the mantra of Guru Padmasambhava. Then recite the words of Guru Padmasambhava, the great wrathful Guru Padmasambhava.
Ahom Bajrangara Pamasardom, Mahom Bajrangara Pamasardom. Mahom Bajrangara Pamasardom, 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 Mahom Bajrangara Pamasardom. Mahom Bajrangara Pamasardom, 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 Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo, Artsik Nartsik Namo Bhagavate Martin Nartin Namo Bhagavate Om Babazo. Om
Bandara Padma Sada Bandara Padma Sada